So you can take a seat. It's going to be very interactive, so we hope you're here to engage as well. We can invite the panelists on stage. You can go ahead. Yes, we need two more mics. Two more mics. Should I ask them? Yeah. We're getting ready. For those of you still settling in, welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we can take a seat. We can take a seat. We can sit down. All right. Thank you. And we need one more. Hi, everyone. Can I have a show of hands if you know someone who is not at COP that you think should be here? One, two. Do you know at three? Yeah. Is there someone you can think of right now that's taking action on climate justice, should be at COP, but isn't here today? Sorry, I'm so sorry for those of you discussing. We started an event. Thank you. So, as you're thinking about that person, we know there are so many people around the world who are taking action on climate justice, but they're not in the decision making spaces. This is what the Missing Majority campaign is all about. It's about raising the voices of young people who haven't made it to COP, whether it be because they weren't able to get a visa, they weren't able to get funding, they weren't properly safeguarded, or they didn't get accreditation. So many reasons that make this an exclusionary space for young people. So today we're going to highlight some of those voices. We're going to share them with you. But just to give you a backstory of this Missing Majority campaign, it started last year. And what we did was ask young people, what is your message to decision makers at COP? What do you want them to know? And Azeez here with me and other young people wrote those hand letters and those messages of young people who weren't at COP and started giving them to decision makers. Up there, you can see there's a negotiator from Peru, from Mexico, from Pakistan, Kazakhstan, Tuvalu, Chile, Panama, UK, and this is how 109 people who didn't make it to COP at least got a little message to a negotiator and were able to kind of champion that message during COP. My favorite story was this is the finance minister of Tuvalu, a country that is, of course, very impacted by climate change. And as soon as I gave him the message, he said, "I'm so sorry." And I was like, why are you saying sorry? We should all be saying sorry to Tuvalu for the impact of climate change. And he said, no, I'm sorry because I didn't mention youth in my speech. And I was like, okay, I take that. This was kind of halfway through COP. And the last day of COP, negotiators again were able to give a speech. And he mentioned youth. And for me, that was a tangible impact of that young person way in a country that wasn't able to make it to COP, whose message reached a negotiator, and that changed his final speech. So this is the campaign we led last year. This year, we're not running around chasing negotiators. We're trying to have a conversation online with whoever wants to listen to those voices of the missing majority. So I'm going to introduce our panel here, and they're going to share some of the stories of young people who are not in the room. And then we're going to have a conversation. So get ready to speak as well. I didn't introduce myself, it's true. I'm Ines Yabar from Peru, working for Restless Development, an organization that works with young people to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And I'm based in Sierra Leone, a country where a lot of young people have not been able to make it to COP. On my left, we have Devika. Go ahead, you can introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Devika Chhabra. I am representing Restless Development India. I'm a part of their Youth Climate Action Lab program, which is currently being conducted in Bangalore, India, which is one of the main cities in South India.
Hi, my name is Angela Zhong. I'm from the United States. I study economics and environmental policy at Harvard, and I'm part of the Restless Development Global Advisory Campaign that just launched. Super excited to be part of this. And I think this is one of my favorite topics to talk about. So really excited to hear what everyone has to share.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Azeez Abubakar. I'm a global shipper and also serve as the Partnerships and Engagement Chair of the Commonwealth Youth Climate Change Network. So nice to meet you all and looking forward to an engaging session.
Thanks, Aziz. So you'll be able to see a
Of
QR
that.
code.
And
Oh, you'll be able to see a QR code on the screen, which is how young people have been sharing their messages with us. You can go to the website, and if you know someone who's not here, they'll be able to add their messages too. We've had over 100 in just the first day of COP, so hopefully we'll have many, many more. But we also want to tangibly hear those stories. So Devika is going to share a few with us.
So I'll be reading a couple of the messages from the website. So here Grace says, "Dear leaders, you have no option but to take action to address climate change. Otherwise, change will change you. And us youth are ready to take up any opportunity to work with you because the future lies in our hands." Azeez?
Okay, so I'm going to I left next one. So this is a message from Lane from
Try to change the world. Critical,
All right. So this is a message from Lane from Nairobi. So Lane says that for so long, young voices have been ignored. And when we talk about sustainability around climate change, when we talk about the future of the nation, but we disqualify young people, young people's voices and their creative minds. It's time to listen to the young people. This is his message to world leaders.
So Alia here has to say, young people have rights to make decisions concerning their future, which seem to have been stolen by climate destructive actions and corporate greed. Young people will find solutions if given the chance to. We're not just asking for a chance, we demand opportunities too.
Okay, so this is another message from Abangar Will. So it says, since the beginning of the fight against the climate crisis, and it says that what are the expected results or positive changes observed? Is asking this question, and he said, what is the plan of the agenda on the fight against the climate crisis? He also said, as a future generation, we young people are much more exposed to the direct impacts of the climate crisis. Young people should be initiated much more into the taking action for the climate crisis. So that's a message from me.
So here we have another very important message from Joan. I think there's no country most responsible for the climate crisis. We are all responsible equally. From parents of a small family to the presidents of superpowers, we should preach impacts of damaging nature. Let the world, young and old, act now.
You can read those.
So here's another one. For long, the young people from the Cure committee have been sidelined from conversations regarding climate change and the environment. Despite the changes in the climate affecting everyone, everywhere, we cannot refuse to acknowledge the existence of inequalities due to sexual orientation and gender inequalities, especially in African countries like Uganda, where I come from. I have had the opportunity to work with the LGBTQ community in Uganda close to 3 years, and never have I ever had the conversation about climate, be inclusive, and taking into account the unique challenges my community faces. Through sharing sessions, I have randomly asked the community to describe their experiences with the environment and to be honest. It's only when we have this conversation that they even realized that they have a role to play and the environmental changes affect them. I want to conclude by saying there is a need to examine the intersectionality of climate change, sexuality, and gender beyond the binary, says Eric from Lifeline Youth Empowerment Center, Uganda.
So the stories you have heard here came through our website, but we also got a few stories, and you'll see them on the screen coming through, recognizing that sometimes with words we can't put a face or a picture to those missing people. And our campaign this year is highlighting, just like a missing poster would. Have you seen this young person? Have you seen them at COP? Are they here? They were last seen doing this. This is what they were wearing. This is what they last said before they went missing. So here are a few.
So this is Jimran from Bangladesh. He was last seen restoring tamarisk and mangrove forests. We don't know where he is right now, but we know that the last thing he had to say was decide now to save the world. Time is running out. If you want to save yourself, you have to save the world.
Okay, so this is Tolu Benro, and she's from Nigeria. She's 22-year-old, and she's missing. She's missing from COP27. She's writing that a negotiation without a missing majority present is not a fair negotiation at all. We can't have a very fair negotiation without the inclusion of young people everywhere, of all backgrounds.
Okay, so next I'd like to ask you if any of you has seen Haniel Shabani. He's from Congo, and he was last seen planting trees in his community. We don't know his whereabouts right now, but last he was seen, he said, "At every opportunity, I will join nature and I will fight for Mother Nature because without her, youth has no future."
Also, I don't know if any of you have seen Rishma Ram from Fiji. She's 26-year-old, and what she does right now is cleaning beaches and planting mangroves. She's helping to save the ocean and marine lives. And our message is we have to act on climate change now, collectively, and we're demanding that commitments be followed by concrete actions to secure a sustainable future for all. Without concrete climate actions, we can't help in fighting the climate crisis. So, yeah, that's a message from us.
So now I have a video from a very close friend of mine who was also in Bangalore working in the same program that I'm working, but she couldn't make it to COP27. So here's what she has to say.
We're struggling with the tech. I don't know if they can see us. I will try and get the video to play. The video. While we wait, so that we don't waste any time, I'm just going to explain what we're going to do later. And we're a small group, so we're going to have an activity where we want you to reflect as well on how we could better include youth in decision-making spaces. And these recommendations, we're going to try and share them with the UAE government, who's holding COP next year. We're going to be seeing them on Friday. So we know there are people watching online. They can also share their thoughts, but we'll come back to that in a minute as the video is now on screen. Cue the video.
You should be on the stage.
Yeah, but it's not working.
Okay, you say from there.
But he cannot see me. Okay, as you're having technical difficulties, I think, Angela, we can explain and then we can play it at the end.
Can we move to the next slide then?
You can go ahead and
Okay. Hi everyone. Thanks to all of those who attended. I think that the permanent attendance
especially
in the
during climate
audience
change.
is sort of indicative of how you actually physically need to be in this space in order to engage in a lot of ways, especially when there are technical difficulties. But we are trying to make sure that there's virtual and physical engagement in this next element of our exercise. So for everyone who's on the live stream, we'll try to pull up a QR code so that you can engage in the document. And for those of you who are in person, we would like to hear your thoughts and brainstorming how we can make the best difference in order to ensure that COP is more accessible for young people at next year's UAE event. So there are 5 different mechanisms we've identified as ways that young people are being failed currently in trying to engage in the COP space. First is a question of funding, right? So a lot of people who want to attend simply do not have the financial means to go to Sharm el-Sheikh, a resort beach town on the Red Sea. Second is a question of accreditation. Let's say that you do find a funder who is willing to back you and financially support you. That doesn't mean that you're able to go, because the people who are from the most affected areas are often those who do not have any passport power, which means that they have to physically go to their embassies and ensure that they get a visa. I think that this is criminal, and this also needs to be engaged with, so I'd like to hear your thoughts on how that can best happen. But let's say we have both of those things too. It's, I think, absolutely necessary for programs to include youth, but also to include safeguarding mechanisms when you do bring youth delegations. So I'd like to ask each of you to think about how many safeguarding mechanisms your delegations considered whenever they brought in young people to the space, because oftentimes there are little to none. But we need people, especially people under 18 as well, here in this space. And that's simply really, really difficult, especially when you have to add on a parent or some sort of guardian to the trip too. Additionally, we have questions of training as well as of accreditation outside of visas, right? So even if you can get a visa to Sharm, can you get a ticket to the Blue Zone? Do you have an NGO that will sponsor you? A lot of the people who are doing grassroots work on the ground are not part of high level or big institutions that have the sorts of access to COP. And finally, in terms of training, let's say you do go to COP. How do you make sure that this is a meaningful exercise and engagement, right? Because oftentimes, literally everyone I know has told me that their first COP experience is incredibly overwhelming. There's tons of events going on. You don't know where the pavilions are. And I think that this is just very, very fair objections about COP. But you need to have sort of mental preparation. You need to have institutional knowledge coming with you to go in and make sure that you make the most productive space out of it, right? Because if there are going to be this many people investing in you, then we want to make sure that you're best able to represent those of you who will inevitably not be able to go to COP. And so with that, I would actually like to turn it to the audience and see if you guys have any ideas or best practices or engagements on any of these 5 steps. So on this screen, you have the QR code where you can write down ideas in the Google Doc, especially if you're virtual. But also, if you want to just raise your hand and shout out some types of best practices your delegations have done in the past, we would love to hear that as well. Or I can start calling on people. So yeah, I'll let it simmer in your brain for a second.
If anyone has thoughts, I have a roaming mic, so I can come to you and you can raise your hand. How can UAE do better in terms of youth engagement? Remember, this is tangible things we can actually propose to them on Friday. So it can, yeah, I can see someone almost raise their hand. Yes.
Okay, so can we? I want it to be like a discussion between you and I. Okay, so I'm Ghislaine Kenye. I'm a youth delegate for the UNICEF. And I just want to know, when you talk about children and youths being part, do you want them to come over, share their experiences, or do you want to have their voice being represented?
All of the above. We would love to hear it all.
Okay, all of the above. So I am focusing more on like my main idea is like having their voices being said, having their own experiences being incorporated and being carried along with this with these different representatives. I won't deny the fact that there are actually tons of people who have a lot to share, more experiences even than I do, that are there and they don't even know that such thing exists. Okay, so with that, I will go back to the main thing, which is like representing the youth's voice. So I believe, I don't know if you've heard of organizations like competitions like Map the System, organized by the Oxford University, where they bring up a problem in the community, and then they bring youth, they organize, ask you to bring up strategic or analyze the problem strategically to come up with policies. I think that's a good way that we can have youth really having a full hand in these policies that they make that govern them. These youths are the ones who come up on the streets and then bring solutions to problems, but then they are not able to fully implement due to the policies that are being made that they don't even know why or where these policies are being made. So I believe that bringing up problem, making these youths to actually bring solutions to these problems will actually help the upper leaders have an idea of what is going through the youth's mind. So I think like being able to organize kind of hackathons where youths are being able to express themselves will be a good way of having the youth's voice carried along with the representatives.
Yes, thank you so much for that. I think that this space is sort of like an internal hackathon where we want to source ideas from each and every one of you. But also, once we do have those youth ideas, because I've heard of dozens of hackathons, we also need to make sure that the governments are accountable for listening to those and making sure that they're implemented if they are good, right? Because oftentimes there are consultations, but I don't think that's equivocating with consent or youth engagement at all levels. So making sure that all of those elements are part of it is definitely key. And one other thing you touched on is the question of like universities. And I think universities are a great area for youth to also engage and get accreditation and visas. And I would love to see more universities like Oxford doing that as well. Does anyone else in the audience have any ideas or best practices? Perfect. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello everyone, I'm Ryan from Hong Kong. It's my first time being here in Egypt in COP27. So really honored and honestly overwhelming to be here during the first day of COP. First of all, I would just say I'm very lucky to be sponsored by an NGO to come to COP27. I have been kind of trained to know about the logistics, what is going on during COP. For example, at least I know what a blue zone is like, what a green zone is like, and how me as a youth can really get involved at COP. However, I would like to maybe give a little bit ideas about how UAE can do better at COP28 in terms of safeguarding for young people as well as training for young people. I think I had that conversations with my local fellows who also come to COP27. she mentioned something about like, yeah, maybe let's make a video toolkit for some people, for youths who will be joining next year or the following years, showing like maybe like a vlog about what a green song is like, what is a blue song is like, and what is the difference between those two, and what is the differences between like a side event and like a negotiations, how the format and how the template will differ from each other. Because I think when it comes to like an indoor meeting or even the World Leaders Summit, honestly, if you ask me what it's about, I don't have any idea what is going on in there. And I think we need some professionals, for example, people who are involved with the UNFCCC or even from UN Climate Change. They will be the ones who provide those accessible video materials to let the global youth know, hey, this is what is going on at COP, and this is what you can do before, during, and after COP. And I think those materials can be scalable, sustainable, and reliable, and trustworthy because they're from UN, right? So I think those kind of materials are absolutely necessary for those people who will be coming to COP and after going to COP to know what exactly you can do as a youth and really amplify climate actions instead of like youth washing us. Yeah, that's my take on that.
Amen. Thank you for that. For sure, for sure. I wanted to note, I feel like the obligation is on the United Nations to make this accessible. It is not on youth to have to research all of this material themselves. Like, obviously, we should do our research ahead of time, right? But, like, the bare minimum is simply not there. If you look up COP, like, there's maybe, like, 2 videos by Bloomberg News explaining what's going on. But, like, negotiations are very, very difficult. There's, like, very small article lines, right? And so we need that sort of baseline process. And, by the way, check out my vlog on this, so we'll see it. We'll see it. But we would love to see youth on the ground making content, but also high-level people making content as well. I think we have time for a couple more interventions. If anyone has ideas they want to share about how the UAE can listen to youth and make sure that next year's experience is more accessible. Okay. I also have a couple of thoughts on funding. So I think my delegation, for example, I'm with SustainUS this year. One thing that they did is not only did they financially sponsor every part of my trip, but we're also getting a stipend on top of it for all of the work that we're missing out on while we're here, right? Because COP is a full-time 2-week event. All of us are missing school. All of us are missing our jobs. And so for some people, these jobs are incredibly necessary to pay off their tuition, their rent, to support their families. And if any adult were asked to go on a business trip like this, they would get compensated. They would get more than compensated for their time, right? But something about being a young person means that we don't get that sort of financial support in the same way. And so I would love to see a lot more NGOs doing stuff like this in the future as well, because our time is just as valuable. I could be working right now too, but I chose to spend it here, and I think that that deserves its own recognition as well. So keep that in mind when you're asking your delegations about how they can support you next year, because we are doing the work. We're the ones pushing for change. But yeah.
Thank you so much, Angela. And I see some people snapping or clapping. So just as a reminder, anyone can join the Missing Majority campaign. If you're watching online and you're not at COP, please do share your stories. We're going to do our best to share them during these 2 weeks at COP. And if you know someone who should be here and isn't, they can come next year, and let's try and make that happen together. Thanks so much, everyone.
Are you the leader of the group? My lady, are you the leader of the group?
Yes, I'll moderate them.
Your leader.
Yes. Thank you. Do they get my? Do they get my? Yeah, can we have this shared as well? Can you just make sure that when it's your turn, you stand up, please? Okay. When it's your turn, make sure you stand up. Also, can we maybe all shift in a little bit?